Hey, what's up? This is me again, Totally at Audio Grid, and this time I'm going to show you how I built our live rack in order to play with my band. Usually there's two types of bands. The bands that are playing vintage equipment and neglecting basically everything that has to do with digital audio. Then there's the bands that are absolute audio nerds, and so am I, honestly. Maybe it's not the whole band of us, but I as a person am already enough to convince all the others to play with using in-ears instead of using the monitors at a location and using digital audio instead of having to carry around heavy amps and all the other stuff, basically. If you're interested in that, go on watching. All right. This whole thing is our monitoring rack. It consists of various components, which I selected with having in mind that we need to use backing tracks because we initially didn't have a bassist. We wanted to have stereo mixes, and we wanted to route as many of our raw input tracks or microphones through this system as possible in order to have a consistent and good monitoring mix. Now let's start with the main components below. The main components, I would say, are the ADAT converters from Focusrite, the Octopre Dynamic. Focusrite also has regular Octopres, which I accidentally bought in the first place because they were cheaper, without actually realizing that the outputs on the Octopres are not digital to analog converters. So I routed all the signals in and got inputs in my digital audio workstation in Reaper. But when I try to route everything out through our interface, I recognized I have no output. I didn't know how to sync the Octopres in the first place. So then I immediately started the returning process and swapped them out to the Octopre Dynamics quickly. So we have two of them because each one of them has a section of 8 inputs. So altogether we have 16 inputs, and every single one of these Octopre Dynamics also has 8 outputs. So we've got 8-1 here and 8-1 here. They're on the back side. So just as the inputs, but the knobs are in the front. The basic idea is to have the raw tracks coming into this rack and to the splitters, which are right in front of these converters, to split every single signal which is coming inside here. These are 16 inputs. We're not using each one of them currently. And give one signal or one cable out to the FOH, to the sound engineer who is working with the signals live. And the second splitted signal we are using in order to route it inside our Octopre Dynamics and have them on our inner monitoring mix. This is the initial idea we have. So basically what we do is, if we have a kick microphone, we search for the label kick and we go inside here. And now this kick microphone, or this kick input, is routed to input 1 from our converters, which goes through our interface, goes through to our digital audio workstation. We'll come back later to that. And there's also an output from the splitter which goes to the sound engineer when we're playing live. As I've come closer, you can see that every single input is labeled. These labels are not final. It's still a work in progress. But we have what we usually tend to use in a live situation, but also in a rehearsal situation, because we are also rehearsing with this rack every single week, so it's being used regularly. We want to have a kick, a snare, tom, floor, both overheads at least. These signals are the ones we want to have in our live mix. We also have the possibility to route a room microphone in here and a second kick, such as a sub kick or something else. Now, initially, these splitters were planned to carry signals for the guitar, or for both guitars, for the bass, and for both vocals. But currently, we are using these splitters only for the vocals to go inside our system. But honestly, in the current situation, we don't even need to use splitters. So basically, this section is, as of now, currently it is obsolete. It isn't used. So splitter 1, the upper splitter in 1, going to the upper octopree, and the second splitter is going to the lower octopree. So you have, for input 1, you have the gain up here. For input 2, you have the gain up here, 3 here, so on and so on. Now, with the octopree, you also have the possibility or the option of using an analog compressor. I don't know which ratio or which possibilities the octopree gives us, but we're using it on the kick signal. On a kick, it works if you're dialing it in. Now, in the upper section, we have our helix stumps, which are producing or generating the final sounds for each of our guitarists. This is for a rhythm guitarist, and this one is for a lead guitarist. Now, you may ask which option we have in order for a lead guitarist to switch his presets, because a rhythm guitarist is usually playing a crunchy, distorted sound and is basically never switching his sound as of now, but he still has the option to, because our lead guitarist is switching his presets, or he's not switching them manually. He would have had the possibility to do so, but we decided to let our MIDI interface, which is inside here, do the switching for him. So basically the MIDI interface, which is inside here, translates all the switching and gives all the input switching information over to the MIDI over here. There's also line 6, wireless guitar bridge, which is carrying the raw signal from our rhythm guitarist's guitar to his helix. And yeah, that's basically it from the input side from both our guitarists. Now, welcome to the back side. As you might see, it's not the cleanest setup currently because it's still a work in progress. Cable management is lacking currently, especially because we don't have everything set up yet. And after our bassist joined, we did have to clear up the space for his setup and his stuff to come in after initially planning out to sample the bass from a Reaper track. Now, the bassist and our lead guitarist are using this double wireless bridge in order to get their raw signals to this rack from their guitar. They've got transmitters, which they usually put in their pockets, just as a rhythm guitarist does with his Helix one. And yeah, that's how it goes. Then there's a self-built bass distortion pedal, which I built myself. I soldered it, and our bassist is currently using it in order to shape his basic tone, which gets shaped even further after getting in a Reaper session. Then we have a USB dock. Don't ask me why we're using this one. This was just stable and it can deliver power via USB-C, but also is able to carry a USB signal. It's currently carrying the USB signal from our MIDI interface. It's working pretty good. It's charging, and the main flaw of using a MacBook in this situation, just as we do, is simply because it only got 2 ports. This one got only 2 USB-C ports, and you have to work with that kind of. We also have it's basically the main core of the setup. We have an RME Digiface USB, which translates the signals from our Octopree Dynamics, sends them further to our PC or our MacBook, and also receives the information from our MacBook and gives them back to the digital to analog converters in the Octoprees. It's this one here. And also, our drummer is using this phone output in order to get his in-ear mix, because he doesn't need a receiver. He doesn't need to be wireless. You've got all the antennas, you've got 6 of them. The upper 4 are for our in-ear monitoring, and the lower 2 are for the guitar wireless bridge, or the 2 bridges. Okay, now we've got back to the prettier front from the ugly backside, and all the signals are going through the interface, and the interface carries all the information over to a Reaper session. Now, you might ask why we chose Reaper. In the first place, because it's pretty lightweight. Reaper can be the solution for lightweight sound editing and mixing and monitoring. And with our M1 Mac it actually works pretty good with a low sample rate in order to have a low latency. So all the signals that we get inside our octopre's through the splitters go to this session and get their processing over here. If you want to know more about the processing, you can watch our next video where I give you a detailed instruction upon how to create a session for such a rack. If you're interested in all the components we've used so far, you can check the description and you will see them all linked down below. Now, before the signals get to Reaper, they get to the RME interface, which has a control surface like this one. And through this surface, we can control and route every signal that's coming through the inputs, through the RME digiphase, and we can route it back to Reaper, and also receive signals from Reaper to the outputs of the octopre dynamics. I routed every single process signal to every band member separately. So every band member has his separate stereo mix. And this was the main goal for me to achieve for the live situations. Now that when the signals get processed, which you will see in the upcoming video, all the signals get back to our octopre dynamics. And after that, signals get to our, let's move the camera quick, to our in-ear system, our wireless in-ear system. Now we've got 4 of them, each one labeled with our band members, 1, 2, 3, 4. This also works, but I can't power it on because I'm recording my voice over the frequency this one uses. Yeah, so basically we've got 4 of them and 4 people receive their output mixes to these units, which then wirelessly transmit them to their receivers, in which they can put in their headphones and listen to the whole mix basically. Every one of them can adjust their volume separately. They can also set limiters, and the most interesting thing is if you don't want to use your wireless bridge, you can simply put a cable in here and play via cable. This is great to use when you're simply rehearsing and don't want to play in a live situation. You don't want to waste batteries or charge your batteries or anything like that. Now, what I forgot to mention is that we're using these multi-cores, 2 of them, which can output all the signals from our octopre's and are responsible for carrying the signals over to the FOH, to the sound engineer in the live location. These are basically extensions from the outputs of the octopre's. If you want, you can also use other cables and link all the outputs separately, but it's just a hassle, so I prefer using multi-cores. Whilst watching, you might ask yourself, how am I going to play when there's no PA at a location, at a venue? This is the answer. Now, in the case of a venue where you can't play via a sound engineer or where you have to use your own equipment, your own amps, for people to actually be able to hear you, what you can do is, with this equipment, you can simply output the signals from these ones through line outs. You simply use a TS or TRS cable in order to output the signals from the helix stumps. And you also need an amp to which you can route these preamp signals to. So basically, the helix stumps act as preamps. They're only preamps, they don't have any power to power a cabinet, and you need some device or some amplifier in order to power your cabinets, which you take on stage. With the bass, it's basically the same thing, but for the bass you need to grab your output signal from the octopre's. In my case, you can also route it an entirely different way. You can route it to an XLR output cable, but in fact you still need to have an amplifier for the bass and a cabinet to route your signal to. Concerning the vocals, you either have to have a PA which is suitable for vocals, or you have to sing without a PA. But nonetheless, you can still use your rack in order to have your in-ear monitoring mixes. So basically, you're using your live rack without having the possibility to route your signals to a sound engineer. You need to route all the output signals you need to your own cabinet and be responsible for the output sounds in your own way. That's the only difference. There's another question that could possibly come to your mind, and this is, what if my PC or MacBook fails at a live event? Now, there's another answer to that. Yet another factor, which is incredibly important, is to have a PC or a laptop or a notebook which is reliable at the end of the day. Because there's many PCs out there that are not good enough for live audio monitoring. Until recently, we've had our RME Digiface audio interface always passing out on this particular MacBook until we actually found out that it's not the fault of the audio interface nor of the MacBook, but the fault of the dock we have been using, or we have been patching our interface right through our PC. So we found a solution to connect our audio interface directly to the MacBook and connecting our MIDI interface through the dock, which is also responsible for charging the MacBook. So what I can definitely recommend is all MacBooks in general, at least from 2020 upwards or newer, simply because they're fast enough to handle the live audio monitoring. And we personally had the experience because we played a couple of gigs already with our M1 MacBook and it ran pretty well. Now, despite the fact that you have a proper MacBook or a proper notebook to handle your live audio, there still can be a small chance that your PC won't work at a gig. What you can do now is to have a small MP3 player as a backup with a special audio file on it, which is split into 2 channels. On the left channel, you can have your click track, and on the right channel, you can have all your samples and all the sound information that gets to the FOH basically. So when you combine this one with a phone jack to XLR adapter cable, you're pretty safe, even for the occasion that your MacBook, notebook, whatever, won't work in the live situation. And you still will have your click track. If you're interested in how to create these click tracks, I will show it in the next video, where I'm also going to show you how to prepare the Reaper project for your notebook or MacBook, and hopefully you're gonna learn something out of it. So I hope this was interesting for you, and if you're interested what gear I have used in this build, there's links down below in the description. And if you're still interested in my content, please hit like and subscribe, and go on watching my next videos.